gigabit connections, that might not be a bad idea to spec out my server with 2, 4, 5, 6 different NICs to support the networking needs of that ESX host. But it's not necessarily the case that you have to include these as physical network connections if your needs for throughput for these connections would allow you to combine those connections onto a smaller number of network cards. So let's assume instead, for example, that instead of using maybe a single gigabit connection across all of these, what I want to do is actually ease the process of dealing with the networks that I have. I don't want to actually have to deal with 6 different network cards in each ESX host. Instead, maybe instead of a single gigabit connection, I have some 10 gigabit connections, or 40, or maybe if you're watching this video a few years from now, we have 100 gigabit connections. Use of those types of connections, well, even when I've got storage and production and vMotion traffic that are passing across them, probably isn't going to consume the maximum amount of throughput that I have available. So in these cases, it may actually make sense for me to create one single pair of connections that are not at the access layer, but are instead at the trunk layer that connect into the rest of my physical network. Now, doing so requires obviously some magic that occurs at the network side, and that's kind of out of scope for this particular lesson. But understand that your network engineers, the people that are actually going to deliver these connections to you, could potentially create such a connection and then provide a series of different VLANs, all of which pass over the same pair of connections for the different types of networking that are required. For example, production and management and vMotion and storage, all being over separate isolated VLANs and thus separate isolated subnets. So you have a lot of options in terms of how you might design your network for vCenter. You can do so in the physical world by creating lots of different physical connections, or you can simplify if you identify that your throughput needs are less than the availability that you have or the capacity that you have, and then consolidate those into perhaps a single pair or 3 or 4 bonded network connections together, and then separate them out logically using VLANs. Now for the rest of this nugget, I want to actually move away from the theoretical and into the practical so you can help you understand how VMware's standard switches can enable either of these situations to occur. So here we have vc.company.pri, and I've kind of squished over the left pane here, but you can see that ESX1 and ESX2 are currently connected in via the vSphere client. Taking a look at the summary screen here, I can see some general information about this host ESX1. I see it has one network here, even some storage stuff that's been configured, and fault tolerance settings here, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now what I want to take a look at here at this point is the configuration tab that we took a look at not too long ago. In this configuration tab, there are a number of different elements here